Now, I want to talk a little bit about the incident that happened where my son found a switchblade and he has now had his home visits revoked from him. I'm going to delve further into this and elaborate. Now, my son, as you know, is currently in Applewood Centers. He has been there now since, I think, September, after being in the juvenile detention center for about 4 or 5 months. They sent him to one group home for a month, and a group home by the name of Abraxas, and then he went to Applewood Centers where he is currently being held. He's been there since September. Now, they said, oh, well, my son was doing well. His behavior was doing well. He's at the point where he's getting ready to be released from the program. And so they were saying that he's eligible for home visits now because his behavior was good and he's doing well. And before, we were visiting him bi-weekly, like every other week. I would visit him for a couple hours at the group home. And so they contacted me, the director, Tamika Potter, contacted me and says, well, he can start coming home. We're going to let him have all day passes. And so all day pass he gets to come home and spend time with us. They were saying from like 9 in the morning to about 7 in the evening, he can come home for the entire day. And, yeah, it sounds too good to be true. And I kind of knew that, they were going to come up with something. I knew because, see, this is how Cuyahoga County Department of Children and Family Services and the Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court has been operating. As you all know, when my children were first taken out of the home, when they finally released my son back into custody, they never released my daughter, which is kind of odd that, like they said before, they've never seen a case where you have two children on the same case, but you have two different permanency plans for them. They were keeping my daughter. And this is going back to how they never allowed my daughter to come home, how they were covering up for this Freemason who was sexually assaulting and violating me and my children, well, me and my daughter. But they allowed my son to come home back into my custody, but they kept my daughter permanently, but they allowed my son to come home back into my custody. And I knew then, if you go back to videos, I had already said that they're going to come up with something else to take my kid back out of the home watch. They're going to come up with something. I was forewarned. I had a dream. The Lord came to me in a dream and showed me. I saw my son at the school surrounded by police. And this was before, he was taken back out of the house. And several months later, after him being home for about 7 months, there was an incident where he just so happened to find a blade on the ground because a child was bullying him. Now, I talked about this before, where they're attacking God's anointed children. They'll pit children up and cause them to harass children so they can get these children in trouble, label them as messed up, or give them this agenda so they can lock these kids up in juvenile detention center, or cause them to go into jail, or cause them to have these rehabilitation services. And this is all an evil agenda. They're using sorcery in these group homes. They're using sorcery in the schools. They're using sorcery in the juvenile court systems. And God knows about this. I didn't know anything. And so the Holy Spirit showed me all this stuff that was happening. I've been dealing with this for over, nearly 15 years. The Lord has been showing me all this stuff. And they're mainly targeting people of low socioeconomic status, poor Black minority people. And so my son just so happened to find a blade on the ground. That blade was spiritually planted there. This is the second time he had a knife. They had him before when they first took him out of the home after they claimed I had educational neglect and they could not find anything because my kids were actually being homeschooled. They had him going to the store. And my son, who was very spontaneous, he's had spontaneous behavior for so long, had ended up walking away because they've been doing this for a while. They have people come in the store, it's usually Caucasian people who have been following me around the store, attacking me, another part of the covenant. God's going to be dealing with all these people. They come in the store and they get me distracted and start bothering me and it's spiritually attacking me. And I turned my head for 1 second and my son had ran away and grabbed a knife. And I didn't know it. He concealed the knife and walked out of the store with the knife. No buzzer went off. Nobody confronted us and said he had a knife, and he just was able to walk at the store with this knife. And they saw him at the park playing around with the knife, just swinging it in the air. And they ended up saying that, they're going to take him out of the house. And so every time they want to cause my children to be removed from me, or they cause my son to get into trouble, it's always an incident where they set him up with either having a knife or a blade, some type of concealed weapon he shouldn't have, or they'll say it's burglary. These things have been happening to us since we were in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. All this stuff started happening when this man came into my life and God had me doing work for his people, and this entire covenant started fighting against me. And so my son found a blade, and he didn't use the blade. He pulled it out, and it said that he showed it and flashed it to some children and told them that he was going to do something to another child. He didn't threaten the child directly, but they said he was going to do something to the child who was bullying him that the school was not doing anything about. And so they ended up, arresting my child. The police department arrested him, put him in a psychiatric facility where he was there for a week, and then Children and Family Services regained custody. They petitioned the court for emergency custody, took my custody of my son again and put him in a group home called In Focus, where he was just allowed to, after 2 days of being there, just walk away out of the group home in the middle of the night, and he ended up going to another person's home. They said he broke into another person's home and he was committed with a felony charge of burglary. So now, fast forward to where my son is at now, after spending time in the juvenile detention center and all the stuff that happened. He's in Applewood Centers, where he's being held in a rehabilitation center or a group home. And like I said, they said he was doing great. He's been doing good. And they said he can start coming home for these home visits. So we'd only had 2 home visits. We had one around Christmas, then we had another on the Friday before New Year's. So my son, his sister came over. She has a baby, and she came over, and I was able to see my grandson, and my son got time to spend with his nephew. And so my daughter was going back to the car, and she asked my son to help her get something out of the car. She had brought something, and he went to the car, and he was only gone for just a split second. I was still inside the house, and he was only gone for just a second. Now, I don't keep any weapons in my home. I don't have anything in my home. I have nothing that he can have access to. I have no alcohol, nothing here. So my son came back in the house. I didn't see him with anything. Everything was fine. And then when he was getting ready to leave, after spending the whole day with us, we had, we went out and went to eat and everything. We had a great time. I ended up packing his stuffed animals for him and everything. I don't know why. I just said, okay, maybe you can have your stuffed animal with you. And he said other kids had their stuffed animals, and I thought it was something just to help him feel at home while he's there, because he was starting to miss being at home, and he was getting used to the visits. And so it was stated that I get a call today after a meeting. We had a meeting to, my son we had our therapy Zoom meeting. We have bi-weekly Zoom meetings, family therapy. So they said that my son had he brought something back from his home visit, and so his home visits are now revoked. And so, I already knew that they were going to plot something and plan something, because I was just exposing recently how, the man, James Penny III, who is part of Freemasons, was one of the reasons why I got my children taken out of the home, was one of the big reasons, because he had been sexually assaulting me and my daughter. He had let his entire covenant come up against us. He had caused problems for my son. He's been causing problems for our family. He's part of Freemasons. I exposed that. I've also exposed how my children have been destroyed, how my daughter has now had type 2 diabetes because of the Cuyahoga County Department of Children and Family Services, and how they did nothing about it when I told them that she was gaining weight and eating unhealthy foods while she was in, the Cuyahoga County Department of Children and Family Services in foster care, and how she's now on schizophrenia medication because she doesn't even have schizophrenia. And so I knew that they were trying to set something up. The Lord let me know they were trying to set something else up with my son. So they stated that he had brought back to the cottage a knife. And I said, well, wait a minute. My son said he found a switchblade by the dumpster while he was here at the house on his visit. And when he went outside to help his sister remove something from the trunk, the drinks that she had in the trunk, he had picked up the knife and hid it and put it inside his stuffed animal and took it back to the cottage. Now, I asked him why did he do this, and he said because the boys were bullying him. He had told me that the boys were bullying him. He had talked to the supervisor, Scott Ball, and the director, Tamika Potter. I had also talked to the director, and no one has done anything about it. It's the same thing that they're doing. They're allowing this stuff to go on. A lot of them are causing this to happen, and they're setting our children up, and this is something that's wicked. They're using sorcery. Like I said, that switchblade that was found by the dumpster, I go to that dumpster twice a day sometimes. I go there every single day to take out the trash. I've never saw a switchblade lying there. That switchblade was placed there spiritually. They placed it there in the spiritual realm, and a lot of you don't think this can happen. This is sorcery they're using. They placed that there on purpose because they knew my son was going to put it there, was going to pick it up. They placed it there for him to pick up. This is the same thing they used to take him out the house in the first place. They used a knife. They used a blade being on the ground when they retook him out of the house the second time when he got in trouble with the law when the police ended up picking him up from the school. They've used all these things, and they're doing it to a lot of our children. A lot of kids will be in juvenile detention center, go to jail, and then end up going home for a few months just to go right back. And this is because they're using sorcery to cause more problems to happen. They're causing these children to get in trouble. This is why they're pitting up children against our children They're targeting anointed children, children of God, who God has predestined to do something. And this is why you see a lot of kids going to the schools that you hear they used to be good kids. They didn't bother anyone, but they were getting bullied or teased, or they go to school when they have a gun and end up shooting up the school. They're causing this stuff to happen. And it's time for the church to pray, because these people need to be held accountable. We're asking that God will start judging them, because they're entrapping these students. They're entrapping these children. They're pitting kids up to bother them. They're planting these weapons here. If I put weapons out, if I put something out that's a danger for a child and the child gets a hold of it, I will be held accountable. And God is going to be holding these people accountable. We're asking that the church will pray that they're all held accountable and that these children are delivered from their hands.